restrict themselves to a reasonable amount. After the first two opening speeches, I will advise that 5 minutes to enable other colleagues to participate. We need to ask for shorter speeches to enable all or as many members to contribute. I shall make it clear that the Chair returns the right to impose a formal speech limit, but I would rather colleagues help each other. After all, it is an important day and we do want to hear as many views as possible. I call Kim Leadbeater to move that the bill now be read a third time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour and a privilege to open the debates for the third reading of the Terminally Ill Adults End-of-Life Bill. It has been a long journey to get here, and I do not underestimate the significance of this day. It is not often we are asked to wrestle with issues of morality, ethics and humanity. But with great privilege of this job comes great responsibility, and never more so than at a time like this. Benjamin Franklin told us that in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. In this House, we debate the latter incessantly. But here, and in the country as a whole, discussing death is something we tend to shy away from. And yet, it will come to us all and to all those we love. And Mr. Speaker, we all have our own experiences of death, loss and grief. There are good deaths and there are bad deaths. And I, like many, have experienced both. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that for some colleagues the journey to this point has been a difficult one, and I want to pay tribute to the way in which the overwhelming majority of members have approached this subject. The second reading back in November was quite rightly seen as an example of Parliament at its best. Contributions from across the chamber were incredibly powerful. The atmosphere was respectful and people listened with care. I hope we will see the same today, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and your team, along with the fantastic clerks and procedural experts who have ensured parliamentary protocols have been followed and have guided us through the intricacies of what can be a complex parliamentary process, which is steeped in tradition but not always easy to follow. And of course, process is important, but it's also important to remember we are not voting on the merits of parliamentary procedure. We are voting on an issue that matters deeply to our constituents. Indeed, the issue before us today is very personal for many people, so many of our constituents, but many of us as well. It is an issue which transcends party politics, and I want to thank colleagues from across the House who have shared their very personal stories with me. And I'm grateful to all colleagues who have studied the detail of the bill. It is, of course, essential that we come to a decision based on the content of what it actually says. And I've been pleased to work with members on all sides of the debate to ensure that this legislation is something that Parliament can be proud of. A cogent, workable bill that has one simple thread running through it: the need to correct the profound injustices of the status quo and to offer a compassionate and safe choice to terminally ill people who want to make it. I won't go into the amendments in detail, as I know that is not the purpose of this debate. But whether it's adding further safeguards and protections for patients through additional training around coercive control, or the addition of specialist expertise through the inclusion of multidisciplinary panels, widening the provision for professionals to opt out of the assisted dying process, providing additional employment protections, or prohibiting the advertising of assisted dying. Cross-party working has strengthened the bill. And the many safeguards, I will give way.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. What level of concern does it give her that since second reading and today, a growing canon of professionals and their independent professional bodies have urged great caution about this bill, not on the principle, but are opposed to the details of this bill and believe it should be defeated?
I thank him for his intervention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what he's saying is people have got different views, and they do have different views. We have different views in this House, and different people in different professions have different views. Every Royal College has a neutral position on assisted dying. I've been pleased to work with members on all sides of the debate to ensure that this legislation is something that Parliament can be proud of. And the many safeguards in this bill ensure only terminally ill patients that are eligible under the strict criteria and who want to access assisted dying can do so.
I felt disturbed by quite a lot of the emails that I received from constituents, some of them who are my friends and who I like, implying that we here are either too stupid or careless to care for the most vulnerable. And is it not true that we all do, whatever the decisions we make today, and we have to continue to educate people and tell people what this bill is about?
I thank her for that intervention, and she's absolutely right. The detail does matter, and that's why I'm so grateful for colleagues who have engaged in the detail. We know that there are different views within the public, and we have to take on board the concerns of vulnerable groups, and that's why the safeguards are so important. But I would also say that there is no one more vulnerable than someone who is dying. I'm just going to make some progress. So patients must have an inevitably progressive illness or disease which cannot be reversed by treatment. And a person is not considered to be terminally ill only because they have a disability or a mental disorder. These clear, strict criteria, plus the multiple capacity assessments, exclude possible serious mental health disorders such as anorexia. I was also very pleased to support the change advocated for by Marie Curie and Hospice UK, which ensures an assessment of palliative and end-of-life care as part of the first report on the Act. We know from other countries, in no small part due to the 14-month inquiry by the Health and Social Care Select Committee, that palliative care and assisted dying can and do work side by side to give terminally ill patients the care and choice they deserve in their final days. It should not be an either-or for dying people, and we need to channel our energies into supporting all options for terminally ill people. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. As she knows, the leading experts in palliative care have come out to oppose the bill, and they point to the fact that hospices are underfunded and that they do not have the same ability to serve patients. So I do gently question whether we are in a position today to make a judgment that patients truly would have a choice at end of life.
I thank him for his intervention, but I would say, as I've said previously, people working in palliative care have a mixed range of views on this subject. Some, and I've met with palliative care doctors, some are very, very supportive of a change in the law because of the suffering they have seen. I'm just going to make some progress if I may. But, Mr. Speaker, it is an either-or decision for us today. Either we vote for the safe, effective, workable reform contained in this bill, or we say the status quo is acceptable. Over recent months, I've heard hundreds of stories from people who have lost loved ones in deeply difficult and traumatic circumstances, along with many terminally ill people themselves. I spent some time with some of these families yesterday. They are real people with real stories, and they deserve to be heard. Adil's terminally ill father took his own life by buying drugs on the dark web. It was his third attempt, and Adil found him in a truly desperate state. He and his sister will never get over that night, or the police investigation which followed. Katie waved her mum off as she made the lonely and costly journey to Switzerland, where she had a peaceful and dignified death. But the family had no chance to say a proper goodbye, and her dad made the journey home grieving and alone. Others have had to watch their loved ones die harrowing deaths despite receiving excellent end-of-life care. Warwick's wife Anne had the maximum dose of sedative, but it wasn't enough to stop the choking and suffocation due to peritoneal cancer, and she begged him to help her put an end to her suffering. But he didn't want the last memory she had of him to be stood over her with a pillow. And there are many, many more. And perhaps, Mr. Speaker, most importantly, I have spoken to terminally ill people themselves. We've spent a lot of time talking about them, but not always with them. Pamela and Sophie both have terminal breast cancer and shared their stories yesterday. Pamela is a proud Christian who just wants to have choice when her time comes. And Sophie, who is allergic to opioids, wants to ensure her beautiful daughter has nothing but happy memories of their time together. Not supporting the bill today is not a neutral act. It is a vote for the status quo. And it fills me with despair, just one more, and it fills me with despair to think MPs could be here in another 10 years' time hearing the same stories. And Mr. Speaker, I will.
That's really kind of you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I have to say I thought very, very carefully as someone that came into this House supporting this principle before voting against this bill at second reading. Can I just ask the honourable member to explain, there are differing views, but before MPs put their name, not to this principle, but to this specific bill, why are the vast majority of palliative care doctors, geriatricians and groups representing people with disabilities, eating disorders and domestic violence all in opposition, not to this principle, but to this bill. And that includes people who support the principle of assisted dying, but not the specific bill. Can the honourable member explain their opposition?
I think we've kind of covered that point already, but these are not homogenous groups of people. They have different views and different opinions. And Mr. Speaker, if we look at the inconsistencies of the current law, it also just doesn't make sense. If someone with a terminal illness voluntarily stops eating and drinking, it is legal for them to starve themselves to death. A competent patient has the right to refuse foods and fluids even if they will die. The exercise of this right is sometimes proposed as an alternative to assisted dying. I suppose you could argue that starving yourself to death is one way of taking control at the end of your life, but it is a deeply traumatic experience for the person and their loved ones, and there are people here today who have direct experience of that. So we have a system, I'm going to make some progress. So we have a system where it is legal to starve yourself to death, which can take days or weeks, but it is not legal to seek assistance from a doctor to take an approved substance yourself to end your pain or suffering and take back control in your dying days. Mr. Speaker, it is also legal in this country to discharge yourself from medical care or refuse life-sustaining treatment, such as ventilation, CPR or antibiotics, as long as you have mental capacity to do so and make the decision of your own accord without any harassment from anyone else. You might think this is fine, and I agree. But there is no requirement for two doctors, a psychiatrist and a social worker, no lawyer and no judge. This is legal. And yet what is being proposed in this bill with so many more safeguards and protections is not. It simply does not make sense. I'm not going to take any more interventions because lots of people want to speak. And of course, there are the criminal offences which the bill introduces, none of which exist now, including life imprisonment for anyone who induces another person to take the approved substance, and 14 years in prison for coercion, dishonesty or pressure. Mr. Speaker, this is a robust process which goes further than any other piece of legislation in the world, and it is far safer and significantly more compassionate than what we have now. And if we look internationally, there are clear, well-established, safe, compassionate assisting dying laws in existence. On Tuesday, I joined doctors from Australia who used 3 key words repeatedly: choice, control and relief. Dr. Greg Mewett has got 20 years' experience as a GP, 22 years as a palliative care physician, and he spoke about the thorough approach that is taken to ensure safety and efficacy of the assisted dying process. Perhaps the most standout quote from that session came from Dr. Jackie Davis, Chair of Healthcare Professionals for Assisted Dying. She said, "By introducing assisted dying, no more people will die, but far fewer people will suffer." Because, Mr. Speaker, this is not a choice between living and dying. It is a choice for terminally ill people about how they die. And I fully appreciate that some colleagues would never vote for any version of this bill, and I am respectful of that, despite disagreeing. But to those colleagues who are supportive of a change in the law, but are hesitant about if now is the time, if we don't vote for change in the law today, what does that mean? It means we have many more years of heartbreaking stories from terminally ill people and their families, of pain and trauma, I'm going to finish if that's okay, of suicide attempts, PTSD, lonely trips to Switzerland, police investigations, and everything else we've all heard of in these recent months. As the Commission on Assisted Dying said in 2011, 14 years ago, Mr. Speaker, the current legal status of assisted dying in the UK is inadequate and incoherent. It outsources a healthcare issue abroad, especially to Dignitas, instead of the government and Parliament assuming responsibility. That was 14 years ago, and we are in exactly the same position today. Things have got to change. And as the government's impact assessment states, the bill will improve equity of choice, ensuring that terminally ill adults from all socio-economic backgrounds can access end-of-life options within a regulated and safe framework. So as I draw my comments to a close, Mr. Speaker, there are essentially 2 ways we can look at the situation we're in. We can look through a legal lens. As legislators, we have a duty to change the law where it is failing. And when the last 4 directors of public prosecutions tell us that the law needs to change, surely we have a duty to listen. We need scrutiny before people die, not after. But most importantly, there is the human lens, which is how I approach most things. Giving dying people choice about how they die is about compassion, control, dignity and bodily autonomy. Surely we should all have the right, I'm going to finish shortly, surely we should all have the right to decide what happens to our bodies and decide when enough is enough. And of course, giving people the right to choose does not take away the right not to choose. So today, we can vote with either our hearts or with our heads, Mr. Speaker. But either way, we should end up in the same lobby. Because on a compassionate human level, and as responsible lawmakers, we should support this desperately needed reform that is rigorous, practical and safe, and is rooted in the principles that should underpin any legislation: compassion, justice and human dignity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.